Hey there, Happy New Year. It's the Nick Handley podcast, the Nick Handley Show on the Husker Max YouTube channel. Also, you can get the podcast where you get your podcast, including Spotify as well. Follow me, follow the show. I am on Twitter at Nick Handley OMA. I say Happy New Year, first show of 2025. In fact, I am looking at a pretty much Christmasless house right now. It's kind of sad. The tree is down. There are a lot of boxes because TJ Henning, who's be joining me all day today. First of all, Happy New Year to you, TJ.
Hey, thank you, my man.
So are you guys done with the decorations? Are they down yet?
Oh no, haven't even touched them yet. They're still
Okay.
up. I got to be honest. Like since we finally got some snow, although it wasn't the big snowstorm we all
Yeah.
thought it would be, like I still love seeing the Christmas lights when there's snow on the ground. So I think I know
Yeah.
you and I differ on this. Like you wouldn't mind getting those things off people's houses, but like I still like seeing Christmas lights in January. That doesn't bother me.
I'm a curmudgeon butthead when it comes to that. Like once you get to, if it's still up past the 10th, I've always said this. Look, sometimes, and because my lights are still up and they're not coming down until it's at least above 30 degrees. I understand the weather sometimes just doesn't let you do it, but you don't have to flip them on. Just because
Yep.
you got them up doesn't mean you have to turn on the light switch, or
Yeah.
you can take the timer off, whatever, however you do it. And you're going to save a little coin too with that energy bill,
It's
got
true,
some
but the house won't look
costs.
as good. But we have on our porch, we have lights that are good year round. They're not just specifically for Christmas. So we kind
Okay. So
of got those separate lights.
so you guys did that.
Yeah, that's what
Okay.
we got going on our porch.
Did you guys do that? Did you put that up yourself? Did you have somebody do it, or was it already in the place
Yeah,
when you
we
got
put it
there?
up ourselves. We had these
Okay.
lights left over from our wedding that you were at, and then we're like,
Uh-huh.
let's put these to use, and they just are good porch lights. So yeah, keep
Okay.
them on year round.
Okay, so these aren't the
They're like string lights.
okay, okay. So these aren't the ones that I'm thinking of. Everybody does it, and it's pretty expensive. You put I think that has some type of adhesive like a tape, but it's you wrap it all around your house and your roof.
Oh yeah,
And yeah, you could turn them on for St. Patrick's Day. You could turn them on for Easter. You could have them on for
yeah.
Mardi Gras, for 4th of July. It doesn't have to just be for Christmas. Now, not having to do that every year, not having to put the Christmas lights up and then take them back down, I would love doing that. But then when I saw what it costs,
Mm.
yeah, I'm good. I'm good with the latter and taking life into my own hands when it comes to stuff like that.
Yeah, I could see that. We had somebody in our neighborhood put up one of those, and I thought, dang, that's pretty nice. But I
Yeah.
have not looked at the price of one of those, so I bet they are
Now, if you
pricey.
install it yourself, I heard it's doable.
Okay.
But if you have it installed, which I'm at that age right now where I'd rather, if I can afford it, I'd rather you do it for me.
Hmm.
If you install it yourself, though, you save quite a bit of money. Like we're talking in the
Okay.
ballpark of like 2,500 to $3,000.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's
Okay. Yeah.
expensive.
I had no idea those lights
Oh
would be
yeah,
like that.
I didn't either. I looked into it because I'm
Wow.
like, oh geez, even if it's a little bit up
Jeez.
front, this is going to pay for itself in the long run. Then I'm like, nope, good. I'm
No,
good.
yeah, and I am anything but a handyman, unfortunately, as my wife knows. So, yeah, I would I would have to have somebody else do that for me.
We've got a lot to get to. We're going to talk Husker hoops, and you were there yesterday in the big
Yeah.
victory once again, Pinnacle Bank Arena. I mean, it's where top 25, top 10 teams go to die, and that happened to
20 wins in a
UCLA.
row.
20, that's right. And what is it? Big Ten conference games out 14 now straight. I'm sorry, home games, 14 home games straight, I
Oh
believe.
gosh, because yeah, they got all 10 last year. They got
Yeah.
2 this year, and then I'd have to think back to that Sam Greasel, Derek Walker year. Then maybe got 1 or 2 at the end
Yeah.
there.
I think it
Um,
might be 14. Don't quote me.
but if they win the next one against Rutgers, that'll be a school record. So
Yeah.
that'll be a lot to play for.
I got to tell you, TJ, you know the teams that I passionately root for, and you know what 2024 was like. Now it's kind of a mixed bag here. I don't want to make it sound like it was all bad. Now, anytime any team that I root for is in the postseason, I don't take that for granted. Now, Cleveland made it in. My Cleveland Guardians.
I know. You caught yourself.
Spelled the stupidest name ever. The Cleveland Baseball Organization. They
There
found
you go.
themselves in the playoffs, but that series against the Yankees was so just gut punch after gut punch. Even when they won, that was cool. The one game they won with the David Fry walk-off, but everything else was just a gut punch after another. So that was a tough ending for their season. The Bears, look, the way that they ended the early portion of 2024, and then in 2024 up until what I'm about to talk about, has been pretty bad, to the point that it's been comedic and embarrassing. I mean, it's been really bad. Especially, we talk about clock management and game management, especially in crunch time inside 2 minutes. Yeesh. And they almost had another absolute brain fart again today. But
Almost.
Almost. Omaha hockey was a very nice 2024.
Yeah, great season.
Yeah, they get to. I mean, they flipped a switch in mid-late January of 24. They got it going. They make school history by getting to the NCHC semifinals. They win the first game in the semifinals, make it to the finals. They beat North Dakota of all teams too, which was great. Get to the NCAA tournament, so that was good. Husker baseball, that was good. They had a solid year. The Big Ten championship run after losing the first game, coming back, that was good too. But between my Chicago Blackhawks, my Nebraska football team, the Chicago Bears, there's not been a lot to look forward. You look forward to it, but every year you're walking away each weekend for the most part, like, what the hell is going on here? So there was this stretch where Nebraska lost. UNO hockey got swept. This was as we're ending 2024.
Mm-hmm.
Bears had just another embarrassing defeat. And it's just like, God, every team that I root for right now, I'm sorry, because maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the problem. I need to quit you because I am holding you down. But what I can say today, and I'll show the shirt.
Oh, Caleb, there it is.
Caleb Williams and the Bears, for the first time since 2018, TJ Henning, take down the hated Green Bay Packers.
It's been that long. Ooh,
yes.
Man.
And it looked so familiar. They had the lead. They're all they need to do is get one more first down. A little swing pass turns into a fumble. Green Bay gets it. Green Bay does enough to put themselves into field goal range. Of course, they knocked down a 55-yarder, just to twist the knife into Bears fans a little bit more. 58 seconds. And so I'm like, well, obviously I'm going to watch because I'm a glutton for punishment. But excuse me. But as they're driving, and even as they get to a situation where Caleb spikes the ball 2 seconds left, and they're going to kick a field goal inside 50 yards. 51? Actually, no, 51 yard. I thought this thing's either getting blocked or it's going to be wide left. And it started on sort of an odd trajectory, but it stayed right inside the upright, and couldn't believe it. They won. Now, mind you, Jordan Love goes out early in this game with elbow injury. I don't care. They could have not started their starters at all today. I would not have cared if Green Bay did that. That's a win. It still goes down as a win. That's a rivalry. And when they made that 54-yarder, that sideline and Jordan Love and everybody, they thought they did it again. They thought they had it. So 2025, I'm telling you, baby, Cleveland, get ready. UNO hockey, Husker baseball, Husker football, get ready, because as bad as it was for us in 24, damn. I'm sorry, hockey, you guys did fine. Baseball, Husker baseball, you did fine. But you know who I'm talking about. We're ready to go. I mean, if this is a sign of things to come in 2025, TJ, let's go, baby.
Well, I hope so for your teams, Nick. I mean, the Bears, you guys have not had a quarterback maybe ever, you could argue, unfortunately. So I hope things go your way. And okay, 2018, you have to go back to the Khalil Mack days? Is that when?
That was Khalil's first year at the Bears.
Yes, I remember that because I used to live with a Chicago Bears diehard, was my roommate from college and post-college. And I could still remember him walking around, watching the Bears-Packers game. So that's why it's ringing true for me. Any solace in taking the fact that, tough season, but you played in the best division in football?
No.
No? Okay.
It was a very good division. And you know what? Tonight's game between the Lions and the Vikings, two teams that I would love to just hate because of the division. And there's a little bit more hatred to the Minnesota Vikings. How can you hate the Lions? I mean, the Lions have been the seller of that division for so long. And what Dan Campbell and that organization, they've actually done things very un-Lions-like. Like they actually taken football very serious. I like what they have going. I feel good for that city. They're doing some. They deserve it. I mean, that's a big moment for them.
Yeah.
And Sam Darnold has been everyone's trash. He really has. He's been everyone's trash up until, other than when he got drafted initially with the Jets. Everybody thought that they could figure him out and fix him and he'd be good. To think that, and remember, it was J.J. McCarthy that the Vikings drafted, hoping eventually they would turn the keys over to him. Well, then he gets injured with the season-ending injury. And so it's like, all right, well, it's Sam Darnold, ride or die. And Kevin O'Connell and Sam Darnold, hard not to be impressed with what they've done. So that game tonight to decide who's going to be the number one seed in the NFC, that's pretty impressive. As long as Green Bay was not in that game, I can stomach that. And so it's a good division. It really is. And hopefully the Bears learn something. But, man, their woes this season, just say it's going to – whoever the new coach for the Chicago Bears is going to be, you've got some work to do. They've definitely got some work to do, but we'll see.
And you mentioned it with Sam Darnold. To me, Kevin O'Connell, coach of the year. I mean, I think everybody 100%. Had the Vikings third or fourth in that division, and then now they have a chance tonight to win it. And the amount of wins they've racked up with what people thought was a washed quarterback already. Like, he's my coach of the year.
I'm right there with you. So we'll get to hoops because that was a fun day yesterday, and boy, something brewing there with Fred. Something brewing with that squad, but something happened also over the weekend that I don't think anybody was surprised by. In fact, once the Pinstripe Bowl was over, TJ, I was round the clock looking at my phone to see if I had missed any announcement on the special teams coordinator. And look, I from everything that I know and have heard about Ed Foley, tremendous person, great guy, and a guy who knows a lot of football. Okay, just because the unit that you oversaw was completely dysfunctional, and they were awful. Doesn't mean that you're a bad dude. Doesn't mean that it doesn't necessarily even mean, well, you don't know football. It didn't work for whatever reason. And I don't know why. For a guy who's got the track record that Ed Foley had, it was a dumpster fire. Just colossal mess of what special teams was. And good for Nebraska. They were able to win that Pinstripe Bowl despite more special teams issues. But that was the big news this week for Nebraska football. So before we get into a lot of the offseason big ticket items that continue, because now it's no longer bowl prep. Now it is pedal to the metal, roster finalization, and getting this team ready and being able to improve off of what was a bowl season and a winning record. Did the Pinstripe Bowl to you, TJ, the way Nebraska ended the season, did it change your overall feel of this entire 2024 season?
No, not for me. I felt like going into that game, it was going to be another one-score game, and Nebraska might come up short. That was my prediction, but obviously they pulled it out. And you could argue it should have been larger than a one-score game. Although I think if you're a Boston College fan, you could point to all those drives you had going to the red zone that didn't come through, and maybe that would look different. But I thought this, again, was a 6 or 7 win team all season long, and that's what they ended up. They got 6 in the regular season, and they added 1. But yeah, not too many things changed for me, Nick. Sometimes Nebraska just needs to get out of their own way. And they were able to do that for the most part of that game. But then, as you mentioned, with the news at Foley, they had one great special teams play in that game, but then they had a couple of their disaster ones. And I still thought maybe going into that Pinstripe game, like, okay, if everything just goes well in special teams, maybe because Ed Foley has such a good relationship with Matt Rule, like maybe he can keep him as the special teams coordinator, or maybe he'll stay on staff, which he still might do. But once you saw that stuff and the post-game comments from Matt Rule, it was like, okay, it is like, as you mentioned in your episode with Michael Bruntz, like, I'm looking for the email, I'm looking at the watch, like, where's the notification? And the notification came about 1 hour after the Nebraska UCLA game happened yesterday.
Yeah. And it's, again, this to me, and I'd be curious on your read on this. When I was talking to Brunsey about what I took away from Matt Rule in year 2, besides with the good and the bad of 2024, this is, again, and you heard this during the bowl game, he's right on schedule. He's on schedule with where he has been the last 2 stops with Temple, with Baylor, and what they've done. Now, he always felt, and he's always said this, that he felt Nebraska, where they were, where the Frost regime left them, is maybe a little bit further ahead than the other programs he took over. And as bad as it was with Scott Frost in that program, and I should say, Mickey Joseph, being the interim coach when he left. I mean, what happened at Baylor? With Temple that was just being able to try to find a collection of 22 guys that go out and play football at a higher level. Baylor was its own animal. So, yeah, I think as bad as we looked at Nebraska at that time in the Scott Frost era, it wasn't nearly as bad as what they had at Baylor and Temple. But he is on track. What I did learn from him, though, is he did not look at year 2 as, well, we've had some bad luck. We may not get to a bowl game. For him to identify a major issue that is completely uncommon to do and to go right to it and not wait till after the season and trying to remedy the offensive coordinator position and the play calling and everything when Nebraska still had some games left where they could get that at least that sixth win, tells me that I wasn't worried that he would lean on loyalty over what the reality needs to be for Nebraska football. He's a guy that understands how important it is for this football program to win. And I think he showed, even though this was a 7 after the Pinstripe Bowl, a 7-win team, he showed, I think, that sense of urgency that I think is very important in this process.
Yeah, and you can point to the change with offensive coordinator with doing that with 8 games left. It seemed drastic at the time, but also necessary at the same time. I felt like it could be both things at once. And I felt like special teams got better in the field goal kicking department as the season went along. But to me, Nick, that's more of a player thing and not a coach thing. Like Ed Foley can only do so much with the scheming and things. And that's where you saw most of the issues, right? I think the stat that everybody's been tossing around, the 10 blocked field goal, PAT, and punts on the season, like almost won a game. But John Hull got better as the season went on. But to me, that's just John Hull getting better at his job. And like Ed Foley can't go out in the kicker run.
The operation was bad.
Yeah. So if you're still having operation issues, and Matt Rule is part of that too. I mean, he's got to have his hand in everything as well. And him realizing that, he's just like, I think we got to go in another direction, and we'll see if Foley stays on or if if he wants to go find something else. But yeah, I think it was a necessary move that mostly everybody was expecting.
There's obviously some interesting names that are going to be thrown around. Bill Busch, who's right there where you reside too in Lincoln. Very highly regarded. We saw what he did in Nebraska. When it comes to special teams, very well knowledged when it comes to that. But also Mike Eckler, who was on Bo's staff, who is now at Tennessee. And one of the phases for Tennessee in another successful year, Mike Eckler oversees, and that's special teams. That is one of their strongest phase. So there's a guy with Nebraska ties. There's a guy that has family in Nebraska. I know this is the whole, we got to get the Nebraska guy. I don't care who it is. TJ, I could care less. I think this is where you and I have always agreed on when it comes to.
We need a Michigan man.
Right. We had to get Scott Frost. If Scott Frost gets fired, we got to find another Nebraska guy. I don't care about the connections, but I am curious about if you were to pull somebody away from a program like Tennessee, what would the lure be other than what Nebraska already has going for them? Well, there is history and connections and family ties and to the state and roots in the state of Nebraska. So if you're going to play that card, obviously a guy like Mike Eckler would be a very worthy candidate. I'd be shocked if he is not at least approached. Now, I'm sure Tennessee will make that extremely difficult for him to leave, but that would be another interesting name for special teams coordinator. But whoever it is, TJ, this isn't hey, we need to go from worst to first when it comes to a certain category. You just got to be a competent phase. You've got to just be able to do the basic things and be relied on. To me, long snapping, those are basic functions. Getting the hold down, those are basic functions. Being able to average over 41, 42 punts, yardage a game, those are basic functions. Being able to pin teams and be able to flip the field successfully, those to me are basic things. Being able to have a high success rate inside field goal range, inside of 40 yards, basic. All these things, Nebraska has been on the struggle bus for far too long. Even to have an average punt return yardage of over 4 yards, to me, doesn't seem like that. Well, we're talking about really changing things up. No, to me, all of that seems basic. So again, I understand people want to see this thing just take off and look great. Think about if they can just not trip over themselves, how much better that phase of Nebraska football would look.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, yeah, you mentioned the lack of punt return yardage, kick return yardage. Like growing up, Nick, for me, like DeJuan Gross is one of my favorite players.
Yeah.
Getting to watch him get back there and take that thing back to the house. And, for the younger generation, maybe they would say DeMornay Pearsonell. I think the last kickoff return touchdown was J.D. Spielman. Like those plays are just so exciting. And like, yeah, you don't have to hit a home run every time, but it would be great to at least like average over 6 or 7 yards on a punt return, or like close to 10. Like just, yeah, have a threat is right. And the names you mentioned, yeah, Mike Eckler. I mean, I'm sure money would be a big play because I'm sure he's getting pretty well compensated in the SEC over there, but he'd be comfortable coming back here, having spent time here. And I was messaging with Jake Sorensen before and during the Nebraska basketball game yesterday. I'm sure he would not love to lose Bill Bush, him and Sip, but Bill Bush obviously would be a great candidate and did a tremendous job with his time here in Nebraska. But whoever it is, like you said, just make things competent, at least get us just the baseline average. Almost be like, don't know who you are. Like, we don't need to know who you are, like Bruce Reed. We don't need to know how much you make. What was it, 250? The joke was, or 450?
Oh, yeah.
Like, be like Marco Ortiz. Nobody knew who Marco Ortiz was last year, but we all know who he was now because the snapping issue was not great this year. So whoever it is, just do your job and we won't remember you as much, and that'll be a good thing.
There was a real interesting write-up from the Kentucky rival site on the wide receiver culture. And the reason I bring that up is because we now know Nebraska has not only the wide receivers coach, but also has 2 wideouts from that group. When you think of the group that needs to take the biggest step forward in 25, is it the wide receivers? And since I've been on, since the last podcast, it happened the day that Bruncy and I recorded. Maybe 2 hours after we recorded, Jalen Lloyd hits the transfer portal. I think that took some people by surprise, but I think the big question is, did he just not feel like he was going to be a fit, or was there something else? And that one hurts. Local guy. It's a guy that possesses a lot of speed. I mean, we're talking about elite track speed, but for whatever reason, even with Dana Holgerson, you could never really get him involved. And then the whole question of Isaiah Nayor, is he's out of the transfer portal? Is he trying to come back? What's going on there? So this is a very interesting group, but I'm curious. It doesn't have to be the wide receivers. And this write-up, by the way, about the Kentucky wide receiving culture, it wasn't necessarily a glowing review, but again, it's coming from a site that covered Kentucky, and now the wide receiver coach and 2 of the wide receivers are no longer there, including the recent addition, and it talked a little bit more about him and Gilmore. I had to get that one a double take, by the way, because I thought it said Happy Gilmore, not Harley Gilmore. But apparently there's been some off the field altercations, or at least one incident in particular here in last month in December. So you hope that as they try to find playmakers, that's nothing to be alarmed about. But to me, it is. To me, it's wide receivers. TJ, I know everyone looks at offensive line, and that's going to be interesting this year. But I think the wide receiving group, especially if Dylan's going to take that next step, you got to have the horses there too.
Yeah. I think a couple position groups that come to mind for me would be the D-line, knowing what they need to replace there, and the linebackers. And I have really liked their last 2 linebacker pickups. The one they got from the Sun Belt yesterday, and then the Deshaun McCullough. But I'll save those for another time because I want to stick with your pick, and I would be right there with you. Would be the wide receivers group. I mean, you got an elite quarterback, and I could not believe how good I felt when it was 3rd and 10 this year early in the season. I was like, this freshman can get that.
Yeah.
Like, so you need to get playmakers around him. And Nick, you remember when we had, after that first season with Scott Frost, we were like one of the very few people who were able to actually get him for a one-on-one interview. And the one thing I remember I turned into a 30-second promo clip was, he said, we got to get Adrian Martinez some help. We got to get playmakers around him. And unfortunately, that didn't happen until his last year when they got Samori Toure. I mean, they tried. Of all these wide receiver transfers in the last 6-7 years, it feels like there's only been 2 hits: Trey Palmer and Samori Toure.
Yeah, and you almost wonder if Adrian's watching that year when he's at K-State and they were having their own success, if he's looking at what's going on in Nebraska and be like, damn, I wish I would have had that dude.
No.
Yeah.
Maybe Jamal Banks like saved himself these last 4 games to like get him in the middle tier.
Yeah.
But like you just think of so many misses, like Kanawai Noah, the Cal transfer, the number 1 wide receiver in JUCO, Omar Manning. He ended up having 3 seasons and just was a non-factor. Like that
big dude
was a
too.
killer.
I mean, you looked at him, you're like, oh my gosh, how is anybody going to defend him? I mean, and you know, then you're putting Billy Kemp in a position of like, you're going to be our number 1. That's to no fault of Billy Kemp's, but he's not a number 1.
Yeah, and you
had
a
complimentary receiver.
J.D. Spillman wasn't a transfer, but undersized guy, but 3 straight years over 800 yards receiving. Like that's tremendous. You would take that any day of the week. So one of these wide receiver transfers that you got, whether it's the kid from Cal or the 2 guys you bring over from Kentucky, one of them's got a hit, or the other players you're developing within your program, they got to be a hit, because if you want to see that improvement like you want to in offense, like I said, the Dana edition is great, but you also got to get better playmakers, and you got to make sure you hit on one of these wide receivers.
You know, and I mentioned if we're talking about Dana Holgorsen, really his only request was one guy, and the guy that they ended up getting over in Da'Keil Shorts, coming from Kentucky and what he brings to the table. You know, that's the thing is I didn't know what to expect out of Joey McGuire, but I'm sorry, not Joey. That's his old man, Garrett McGuire.
Yeah.
But at least Shorts does come in with college football experience. He's been around Holgorsen. There's going to be a lot of that familiarity with one another, and the type of wide receiver that he's been able to produce in his times as a wide receiving coach. To me, that's something. But it's to me, it's one of those position groups that I feel like we've been sold a bill of goods, and this goes beyond and far, you know, much further before Matt Rule got here, of that group, because you brought up Omar Manning. I was so excited about that dude. Remember when they had the COVID year? So obviously spring ball and everything gets shut down. So the following year, it was basically a way to welcome fans back, and they had that open practice, and it was in the spring. I remember people who went to that open practice, everybody was raving about Omar Manning. Like, oh my gosh, this dude is huge and he looks great. And that group collectively, I mean, you got to go back to essentially Westerkamp, Kenny Bell, Quincy Enunwa. Go back to those groups where you could say, okay, that was at least a group that was reliable, had some big plays in them. Dare I say, even at sometimes overachieved. Since those guys, we have not seen a wide receiving group at Nebraska that has even come close to the standard achievement, let alone overachievement. Trey Palmer by himself, sure, but collectively that group, I feel like every year, oh, there's a guy here, there's a guy here, oh, this guy, oh, that guy, oh man, that's going to be huge. And then the result is minimal. And that needs to change. That has to change. There needs to be, like you said, the guys either from the Kentucky transfer, or the 2 now, or the one from Cal, or one of the younger guys trying to step up. They've got to find, in my opinion, and I know some people would disagree with this, because if the distribution from Dylan Raiola is, you know, kind of scattered when it comes to his wide receivers, there needs to be a guy that's pushing for 1,000 this year. I'm just going to throw that out there right now. There needs to, as much as I think they're going to throw the football, there needs to be that one alpha that is just going to Trey Palmer it, is going to wake up in the morning saying he's pissed off, you know, and he's going to have the ability, cover me all you want. You're not going to be able to do it. And I got a guy that's going to give me the football as well. Yeah.
I mean, you would love that. Man, is the 1,000-yard receiver more likely than a 1,000-yard running back in Nebraska right now? Like,
that's a great question. That is a great question.
I feel like it could be right now with Dylan Raiola, and
I would say it's more with the receivers, yes, because of the system and the quarterback.
Yeah, but you got to make sure everything else is right, because you can get a talented guy like Wan'Dale Robinson, like they did, but then you use him too much at running back, and he doesn't like it, and then he goes and takes his talent somewhere else. So you got to make sure your running backs are good, and yeah, man, you got to make sure that you might be changing my mind. It might be more the wide receivers than some of the other position groups.
You mentioned running back and 1,000-yard rusher. I want to get your thoughts on this because just when I'm ready to kind of give up on him, and sometimes he does it to himself because he actually goes into the transfer portal and comes back out. I can't quit Emmett Johnson. I can't quit him.
Oh,
I can't quit him.
Yeah. You can't.
The leaving the dude in air in the Pinstripe Bowl. Now, sometimes he makes unnecessary cuts or he'll bounce it when he should have cut it in, or he'll cut in when he should have bounced it. Sometimes there's too much of that. But damn, there are kind of going back to this guy here in Caleb.
Yeah.
Like I said, like there are glimpses, when you see glimpses and you're like, yes, if that can just be bottled up, this guy can flat out ball. Yeah. I can't quit Emmett Johnson.
Oh, I'm with you. I think what's not to like about him? I mean, maybe he will be the first guy to go over 1,000 since Devine Zigbo. And yeah, maybe you have a thing for running backs with the last name Johnson. I remember
I was Ramir, yeah.
I remember 6 years ago cutting up another promo for you, like how much you loved Ramir after that Maryland game. And I was like, I liked what I saw too. And unfortunately we just saw flashes, and what an incredible story with him dealing with tragedy and coming through on the other side of that. So happy for him that he had a great game in that Pinstripe Bowl. But yeah, Emmett, him coming back is huge for this offense.
Do you feel that Nebraska will shake down every possible tree, building, wherever you can get some type of good fortune to fall into your lap? Can they have that in the transfer portal when it comes to offensive line? I mean, they're trying. If they don't do it, TJ, it's not going to be lack of effort, but that's a position group of considering what you're losing and just a lot of unproven around it. This is going to be the first time I can really say, man, I'm really interested in how Donovan Raiola has been able to develop.
Yeah. And Raiola has been a lot better than all of us, I think, thought he would be. And maybe that blessing or the injury that happened earlier in the season was like a blessing for like a Gunnar Gatula to get more minutes this year, more snaps, and increase his experience and get him more ready. But yeah, like I think of offensive line transfers that have gotten in the past, and most recently like a Jacob Hood, right, out of Georgia, wasn't he? And it just didn't amount to other things. Or I know in the past,
Ben Scott was good though. Ben Scott out of Arizona State,
Ben Scott was great,
pretty good. So it's been kind of a mixed bag.
It's kind of almost like you want guys like the linebacker they just got yesterday, who was first team all Sun Belt. Like I'd rather have a guy who's proven and getting the snaps and doing it at a lower level than a backup on an elite team full of elite players. Because at least you know that they're putting in the work and doing it where you may not, there could be a myriad of reasons why they're not playing at their school. It could be other guys are just talented, or that their ranking of a 4-star, 5-star player isn't right. And so I would look at going to one of the Dakotas or go to the Montana, like go to those smaller FCS schools that routinely get far in the playoffs, and maybe go pick a lineman out of there. And I would feel a lot better about that.
I'm glad you brought up the proven players, even if it's at an FCS or a group of 5 level. And you remember this because I believe we were still doing a show together when Nebraska got Tyreek Johnson from Ohio State. And I thought, oh man, this is huge. I don't care that he didn't play that. Yes, a former 5-star. He's in a championship bowl. Well, of course he's not playing yet because the dude's got All-American after All-American in front of him. He's going to be a stud here. Yeah, that didn't go well. So you bring up a good point. There are those players that have gotten their reps, especially, and I think certain positions are different. I think offensive line, though, the more reps, the more you've been in the trenches and you've developed a little bit of that college nastiness to you, I think serves you well. So to me, that is a huge, between now and when they get into spring ball and start to finalize that roster a little bit, at least up into spring ball, I think, TJ, there needs to at least be 1, if not 2, offensive lineman additions. And wherever they come from, and I think this group understands that. I think they're being very creative on how they're presenting offers to who's out there in the transfer portal. That's a major need because I think what they've done at the skilled position has been good, especially at wide receiver. But you're turning a lot over on that offensive line. And it's an offensive line that, even in a different system with Dana Holgorsen, it needs to take a step forward with that offensive line, especially, again, going back to why I said wide receiver is so important and why offensive line is going to be huge, is that big step that Dylan Raiola has to take in year 2.
Yep. Got to be able to protect the quarterback. Any thoughts on if they need to go get a tight end in the portal now with that Fedoni news?
First of all, I don't think that this surprised them. I think they kind of expected this. I think there was always a thought, especially, and keep your eye on the fact that the tight end crop in the NFL draft is not very deep. This could be an opportunity for Thomas Fedoni to have some good workouts if he does indeed decide to go the NFL route. For him, it might make more sense to go elsewhere, to stay in college football one more year and find another place and try to get the targets up, try to get the receptions up, and have a little bit more ability to be a playmaker that we all thought he would be. I said this, and I don't know how you feel about it. I said this with Bruns. I'm trying not to take too much away from 4 quarters of football, but you know what? I'll bite when it comes to Heinrich Harburger at tight end. Athletic dude with speed that can get physical. From what I've seen, his hands are fine. And, that's going to be a constant focal point in the offseason. If this is a guy that truly, like he says, wants to play at the next level, it's not going to be a quarterback. It could be at a position like this, especially in an offense like that. Heinrich Harburg is someone that I'm really interested in. And also, I think you have two amazing athletes that could be playing that position, in Carter Nelson and Heinrich Harburg. So I'm not overly worried. Wouldn't be a bad thing to have going back to what you said about offensive lineman, guy with a little bit more snaps that you can lean on a little bit. They've got some other bodies in that room, but those are 2 guys, as far as athletes on this football team right now, that are right up there with the very best of them, that are both playing that position.
Yeah. Fedoni obviously never was able to reach the potential of that number 1 tight end recruit ranking. And obviously tearing 2 ACLs was a huge part in that. And maybe things would have gone completely different, but still obviously really solid. But losing him and Borkacher, I was always kind of high on Borkacher.
I think Holgorsen was too.
I think he was always kind of underrated. And I thought Harburg at times early in last season did a good job of finding him. So I think with losing those 2 guys, that's where I would go and still try to find one in the portal. But as you mentioned with Harburg, I like Luke Lindemeyer. Yeah. I know they have the one guy waiting in the wings that was an LSU transfer who got injured.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then you mentioned Carter Nelson, and I think that's a good option as well. But, they wanted to get on the field this year, and that was at wide receiver. Is he still going to be good at wide receiver that maybe you keep him there as well? So I would still, if I was the coaching staff, I would look for one tight end in the transfer portal, but we'll see what they do. They definitely have options. The Harburg one is intriguing, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't want to wrap this episode without talking some Husker hoops, which we have to do, because I put this out there. Well, first of all, do you think there's something to this? I just said Nebraska ball about to be ranked. After they beat UCLA, they are, what are they, 33rd net ranking now? 30
for Nebraska 30, or UCLA?
For Nebraska. They bumped up.
I think 33rd, 34. I think it was around there, yeah.
They're 12-2. Far better than,
in a row.
Yes, off to a great start. A, are they ranked come tomorrow? And B, do we need to start having a conversation about raising the ceiling for this 24-25 squad here?
Yeah.
I know you're smiling because you're as big of a Nebraska basketball fan as I know, but you go into it with a even keel approach. You don't get too ahead of yourself. That's why I know I can get an honest answer out of you.
Yeah, I've seen too much losing in my life to get too far ahead. So I used to not think this was as big a deal as it used to be, but I do think brand bias is an issue, and I don't think Nebraska basketball will be ranked. I think they will for sure, because they received one vote last week. It was from either with the coaches or the AP. So to go from receiving no votes to being ranked would be a pretty big jump. Although I think honestly they are deserving of it. I mean, you could put them
12-2, and you got some big wins in there.
I think if you for sure if you continue this and go win at Iowa on Tuesday, then yeah, I would put him in, because even if you falter at Purdue, not many people are going to fault you for that. As to raising the bar,
I guess let's ask, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What does the standard mean? Because, okay, my preseason prediction was they would be in the conversation, the bubble, they would fall just short.
Yeah,
that's still a possibility.
A lot of prognosticators had them, right? Joe Lunardi, they were the first team out for all of like the offseason.
Yeah. And I thought, if they could follow up a tournament season, at the very least, if you're not going to make the tournament the following year, you got to be in the conversation. It can't be just a ho-hum 500 year. I watch this team. It's their overall experience collectively, the overall age of the team, the way they defend, and the way that they were able to get just enough offense against an elite defending team like UCLA. UCLA is holding opponents to 58.5 points going into yesterday.
Yeah.
And they've been great. And it wasn't like it was pretty. I'm not trying to say Nebraska put on a scoring clinic, but they got the better of UCLA. And if you would have told me they would have done that where Connor Essegian has 0 points, make 0 field goals, but what Nebraska is able to do, TJ, compared to where they have in the past couple of years where the shooting has been cold, and give Bryce Williams a lot of credit for this, they're getting to the rim and they're knocking down free throws. This has not been a great free throw shooting team in years past, and they were outstanding yesterday.
Yeah. My preseason prediction was kind of like yours, 18 to 20 wins. Just wasn't sure how the offense would look without Rink and Kisei in there. Kisei, I always mispronounce that. Apologies, Kisei.
I knew something I didn't.
But still thought they also had the ceiling could be higher than what I projected, knowing that they overachieved last year from what I thought as well. Yeah. So maybe could I raise the ceiling more up to what they did last year, 22, 23 wins? Like, yeah, I could get with that. But the Big Ten is still going to be a bear. It's still going to be tough to get through, especially when you play great defensive teams like UCLA. Like, seeing that defense in person yesterday, I was like, that defense is legit. Like, that is a Mick Cronin team to a T. Like, they are just going to be up in your grill, full court pressing you, making this an ugly backyard game. But Nebraska, to their credit, they're a great defensive team too. And as Fred Hoiberg has started to say a lot more these last few weeks, like, we're having to play more like 2 years ago with Derek Walker, Sam Creasel, Emmanuel Bandamel, Juwan Gary, before those guys went down. Like, we're having to win gritty over pretty compared to last year's team. And yes, getting to the free throw line is part of that, because the first 3 games this year, you're like, okay, yeah, what is this offense going to look like? It's not pretty. They're not hitting 3-pointers. Like, oh man, people were saying lack of athleticism, which I could see, but I was also like, I just don't think that they're making as pretty many shots, because you could argue, CJ, Kisei, and Rink aren't the most athletic guys. No. Jamarcus Lawrence, Josiah Alec, they were, but you brought in other guys like Braxton Mia, who's athletic. So, but yeah, yesterday that UCLA defense was doing a tremendous job on Bryce Williams, right? Like, he went 2 for 12, I think, yesterday.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking, okay, what is Bryce going to do in the second half to adjust? Because every time he gets to the free throw line or lower, they are doubling him, or they basically have like the next guy, the next defender over who Bryce would pass it to, like, is acting like a QB spy. He's like just totally keeping his eye on Bryce. And I don't feel like Bryce changed much, other than he's just like, screw it, I got to force this and just try to get to the free throw line, which is exactly what he did. He got there 12 times, made 11 of them. The guy's shooting like 92% on free throws. He's been absolutely on a tear there. So yeah, that was a huge part of the game yesterday. And then the bench, like, Andrew Morgan, I thought was the player of the game, if not Sam Hoiberg.
Sam Hoiberg, was fantastic as well.
Yeah, and Sam Hoiberg mentioned that in the post game that Andrew Morgan pulled a Sam Hoiberg, where he got the steal and then took it to the other way, and that got the crowd really on its feet, because fast break points were at a premium yesterday with those 2 great defenses. And then Andrew Morgan had 2 and 1s that really just got the crowd more into it. I thought he was phenomenal in that second half.
And, I talked about how shocked I was at Essegian's offensive production. He had 2 huge rebounds there in crunch time too. Yeah. So, I mean, even though he wasn't doing it on the offensive end like he's used to and that he has this season, he was giving you in the plus minus, he was giving you plus minutes. And that's what you got to have. There's going to be moments where he's just not going to knock some of those shots down, or teams are going to defend him more when he's coming off the bench. If he's still giving you a positive in the plus minus there, like he was, and giving you, quality possessions and being able to defend as well. I mean, and you bring up the Derek Walker, Sam Griesel team. It was at that point that I think Fred Hoiberg understood how he's going to win at Nebraska. And that is finding not a bunch of guys that can go around scoring, coming from, previous schools or how they were recruited, that are high-level offensive guys. He knew he needed to have one, maybe two. But I think he realized the importance of being able to have that chemistry, being able to have guys that like where you don't have to throw in healthy scratches because somebody is not getting it. Somebody is acting like like a punk, that he had to do it the first couple of years, where you didn't have those issues. I think this is where we're seeing Fred Hoiberg build the successful model at Nebraska. Is he's still going to value the things that made him successful at Iowa State and being able to find scorers. But remember those Iowa State teams too. Those guys look like they love playing around each other. I mean, there was chemistry. They knew exactly where one was going to be on the break. If somebody was doubling down, I mean, it was second nature where they were going to distribute the basketball, and then that guy was going to knock down a shot. So there's still a lot of those concepts that I think exist with what he's identifying, but you're starting to see that chemistry going back to 2 years ago where they fall just short of how that team finished, and then what this last year's team did, and what this team right now at 12-2 looks like they're doing. There's the chemistry with this team, I think, is definitely evident, much like we've seen the last 2 years.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Those guys seem like in the post game and on the bench, like they love being with one another, love hanging out. And to your point with the defense, Nate Lenzer, assistant coach for the Huskers, and ever since they brought him in, I mean, the defense, because when Fred first came here, you're like bringing Doc back. You're like, all right, the Doc's had the defense. Yeah, it's going to be back. It's going to be just take off where it used to be. And that just wasn't the case, whether it was the players or the scheme or whatnot. But ever since they brought in Nate Lenzer, I mean, he is on those guys, and then you bring in great defensive players like Juwan Gary and Braxton Mia, and things are going to go your way. Your Connor season point, yeah, he was 0 of 6 from 3 yesterday, and he kind of got some of the K-State treatment, like, he's about to hoist it, and you hear the oohs, like, because he's been shooting at such a good clip, but 0 for 6, but he was plus 24 yesterday when he was on the court. So, like, still making things happen with his rebounding, like you mentioned, and getting to the free throw line at one point when the offense was a little stagnant. But yeah, the bench, when Bryce Williams went to the bench, that's when the Huskers took over, which you normally wouldn't see. Right. Andrew Morgan, Sam Hoiberg, like those guys just really made it happen and really got a big win yesterday. So you mentioned about raising the ceiling for this team. Is that something that you're thinking about doing, like from your preseason prediction right now?
I am. I truly am. And this is not to jump way too ahead of myself as far as what I think this team is right now, because I still have visions of that Michigan State game in my head. Yeah, that was bad. That was really, really bad. It was. Yeah. But the way that they overcame that, and there's a little bit of that also with Fred, where he not only the teams that are finding chemistry early, but I think Fred knows how to communicate. I think he knows how to connect with those guys. I think last year that team seemed very connected. I think this year this team seems very connected. So I think there is a lot of that, where if they have a bad night, I think at least I do feel a little more confident that that's not going to parlay into 2 or 3 bad nights in a row, that they can cut that thing at the head of the snake, and then they can find some success, whether it's on the road or at home. And that's the next step I want to see with this team right now. Is we know what they can do at Pinnacle Bank Arena, but you mentioned going to Iowa City, and they're not a great team this year, but that's Iowa. I mean,
they're a bubble team right now.
Absolutely. And so that's another team that, hey, this would be ideal for the Hawkeyes to host Nebraska and to knock them down a peg or two. You mentioned Purdue as well. Nebraska being able to find, this is where I'll feel real confident in raising the bar and saying Nebraska possibly, dare I say, could try to repeat what they did a year ago when it comes to the Big Ten standings and try to find themselves into the 4, the 5 seed. Well, you got to win on the road. And remember, Nebraska failed to do that last year, with the exception of, they finally got 2, I think, conference games in a row, but it was an towards the end, 0 for whatever stretch it was before they finally did that. You get some opportunities early on, because I remember after last year when they had beat, I think it was the Purdue game, when they beat Purdue in Lincoln on a Tuesday, they had Iowa at Iowa City on a Friday.
Yep, you're correct.
And I said, that is going to be a very tough game because you just came off the high of knocking down Purdue. And now you're going on the road against a decent Iowa team, but going on the road and doing something that you need to prove that you can do, and that is win away from the home arena. And they got smoked in that game. That's where I thought they would take a big step. They didn't do that, but they continued to win at home. This is another great opportunity for them to get that win that they had yesterday against a top 25, number 15th ranked UCLA, go on the road and be able to take care of business against an Iowa team that, you know what, you should expect to have success against.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. A lot of people are bringing up that same scenario we had last year, as you just mentioned, that they upset Purdue and then they went to Iowa on a snowstorm and there was only about 2,000 people there. And Nebraska completely no-showed in that first half. They had a nice charge in the second half, but they were down so much that they had no chance. So if Nebraska can be ready for this game, and I think they will be. Sam Hoiberg mentioned it after the game, post-game. He's like, we know what happened last year. We upset Purdue, and then we were at Iowa, and so they're going to be ready. And then if you can, I'm so used to Nebraska basketball being blown out at Mackey Arena in Purdue, but if you can just hang tight and even do the crazy thing of winning over there, forget all the road talk, and maybe that shouldn't even exist right now because they won at Creighton and won at Hawaii. Now I know those aren't conference games, but I think this team realizes that they have the potential to be pretty good. And I think they want to at least, seize the moment a little bit, and maybe they can start by doing that on Tuesday.
Yeah. I will say this, they've gotten my attention far more than I thought that they would at this point of the season, where not only where the record is currently, some of the teams that they've beat and the way that they have done it as well. I mean, they got an MTE. You mentioned out in Hawaii. That was great to see. What they did against Creighton, even though it's such a weird Creighton team. I don't know what to think of that Creighton team. That is a weird team. The Big East. I saw Joe Lenardi's most recent bracketology has 3 teams.
Yep.
In the Big East, and that's it. Creighton, not one of them.
I know Providence ended up losing to UConn today, but for most of the game, they were up. And Providence is not good this year.
No. So I don't know what to make of that. But what Nebraska has, at least early on, shown is far better than what I thought. And that's not to say that I didn't think that this team wouldn't have a chance to get into the tournament, but I just didn't think we would see I thought this would be a slower developing process with this group. I feel like it's ahead of schedule, but that's the major box I want to see them check next, TJ. The opportunity that they have against Iowa on Tuesday, and then what they can do here in the month of January in Big Ten road games. That's not to say you can forget about and just go Cadillac Cruise at home because you're going to win those games. No, you still establish home court the way that they have, but start showing that you can do those. You can win away from there in January is where I'll start to think, damn, I think Fred's cooking right now with this squad. I think Fred's cooking right now as the head coach of Nebraska men's basketball, because I think there is something there. I think we're seeing the Fred Hoiberg that we thought we'd get right out of the gate in year 1 with Nebraska.
Yeah, it's taking some time, but man, it seems like it's maybe here, and if it can stay, that'd be quite the run. You mentioned that this team has caught your eye earlier than you thought you would, and I think a lot of that had to do with the schedule, right? When you looked at the schedule, you saw early in the for the Big Ten Conference, Michigan State, Indiana, UCLA, Purdue, at Iowa. You're like, man, that is a tough opening stretch. And right now they're 2-1, and can only hopefully build off on that. I was counting up the other day of their 20 conference games, Nick. 13 of them are quad 1 opportunities.
Yeah,
that is a ginormous amount. I know the SEC is clearly the best conference right now, but I think Big Ten basketball would be second, and I would not have thought of that going into the season. I thought the Big 12 would have been second.
Big 12's a little interesting, and I would agree. I think the Big Ten is flexing a little bit more right now than the Big 12.
So Nebraska avoided the bad losses, and I don't know, even if you lose to Minnesota, that might be just a quad 2 or quad 3. So they have ample opportunities to really pad that resume, and even if you do lose, it shouldn't be a killer. So I feel like Nebraska's sitting in a really good situation right now, especially if they can still make PBA the home court that it is, and then you just steal a couple on the road, and the season could be looking pretty fun.
Yeah, and whether they're ranked or not, as I mentioned, they're about to be ranked. Whether they are, they aren't. They're getting attention.
Yeah.
And it's for the right reasons, which is great. And I think anytime there's success with any team coached by Fred Hoiberg, it's going to get more attention because of how highly regarded he is as a college basketball coach. And so, again, that next step, you have a great opportunity this week, early in the week against Iowa in Iowa City. If they can win that game, I'm not saying, hey, start looking at this team as a Sweet 16 team or anything like that, but if you're trying to figure out if there's something there with this team, you're starting to see a lot of signs of that. If you haven't already, I think we have. This is where you're going to start to see it, especially how they handle it in January. TJ, always a pleasure. Appreciate you joining me. I'm happy my voice made it through too.
Yeah.
A little under the weather.
Glad you're feeling better, my man.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happens when the Bears beat the Packers, man. You get a renewed vigor in life.
You get a little left.
You get a little pep in the step, a little extra in the tank, as they say. So it is fantastic. What do you got going on this week?
Oh, not too much.
Full
week of work. That hasn't happened in a while, right? Like,
true.
The holidays. So got to get back to that. And definitely be watching the Huskers against Iowa and Purdue. And I'm even thinking about maybe UNO hoops. They got off to a great start. 2-0 conference.
They got a big one Wednesday against Kansas City.
They got a home game Wednesday and a home game Saturday. So I might try and check out one of those games. We'll see.
Yeah, you let me know. I might join you. I got hockey this weekend at Baxter Arena as well. I know that game's on the UMKC game is on Wednesday at 8 o'clock. It's kind of a late one. So
it is a late one.
If I can get the kid down to sleep early, there you go.
Yeah, CBS
there you
Sports. Who's the hockey team got, Nick?
They've got Colorado College. Should be a tough one. Yeah. We'll see if maybe we can get courtside, huh? What do you think?
Hey. I would love that.
I don't know if I can pull that off, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, you got. If anybody can at UNO, you can.
You're too kind. You're too kind. All right, my man. Be well. Appreciate you as always coming on. Happy New Year to you and to your wife and to the entire family. I hope 25 as you're with me on this continues to have its ups and very few downs, if at all.
Yeah. Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it.
See you, my man.